Well, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Richard Wright, so I'm Chair of Modern Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. I teach Spanish at Canisius College, and one of the people I had the pleasure of teaching back about a decade ago was Kaitlyn Buehlmann, who is an alumna of Canisius and is our campus minister at Canisius College. And I've asked her to join us to talk about um, what it means to be educated at a Jesuit institution. Kaitlyn also studied abroad and lived abroad in a year of service in Spain for her study abroad and in Ecuador for her year of service after graduation. So Kaitlyn, welcome to our little chat about Jesuit education. If you'd like to say something about who you are and what motivates you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So as Richard said, I work in campus ministry. Primarily, I run the immersion program, so 1 to 3 week long service immersion experiences across the country and across the world, learning about communities and justice issues. And so I think, yeah, that's part of what motivates my work. And definitely, I mean, I can trace a lot of what brought me here today to classes like the ones I took with Dr. Reitzma and the way that my horizons were broadened and I was challenged to think about the world in new and different, um, you know, critical and challenging ways, but just really shifted my perspective and led me to, moving to Ecuador after graduation and doing a year of service and led me back to Canisius doing the work that I do today. So yeah, thanks for having me and I'm excited to be a part of the conversation.
So yes, a full circle. You start off as a student of mine, and now you're my colleague, and I'm very grateful and appreciative of that. I should also mention that Kaitlyn has been an integral part of our Borders and Migrations Initiative since its founding 3-ish years or four. I don't even know anymore. 3 or 4 years ago.
Great.
So, Kaitlyn, as a graduate of Canisius College and someone who educates your peers in this, could you tell us what a Jesuit education means to you?
Yeah. So there are many elements that make a Jesuit education unique. But I think one of the things I want to focus on today is this idea that at Canisius or at a Jesuit institution, we're educating your whole person. So your body, your mind, and your spirit. So we're not just going to make you the most intelligent in your field, the most knowledgeable in your field, right? That's higher education, that's college. We're going to, yes, give you the information and the facts and the knowledge, but we're also going to educate those other parts of you so that you can start thinking critically about the world around you and asking questions. And so one of these phrases that's really common in Jesuit education is becoming a contemplative in action. And this is basically, whether you know this jargon or not, the idea of this is that you're somebody who is reflecting on the world around you and then taking action based upon that. So contemplative, contemplate, think about, reflect on what's going on in the world. What are the challenges? Why are they happening? What's happening with politics, social issues, whatever the theme or topic might be? How do we think critically about that, reflect on our role in it? Spend some time in critical thinking and reflection, but then that reflection needs to move us toward action. So what do we do about that? As individuals, as a campus, as a world, as a society, there's so many ways it can be taken, but contemplative, so reflecting and then taking action. And a big part of that with the Jesuit tradition is the using discernment, or essentially a Jesuit Ignatian version of decision making, where we're integrating in these elements of reflection and critical thinking to then help us decide what our next step is. So a little more intentionality and reflection involved in all of those decisions and all of what we do, so that by the time you're complete with your Jesuit education, it's a different framework, I think, to think about the world and those around us.
And does it stop at discernment?
No, so it needs to move us toward action. This is the critical thing. And so it's not just, we can think about, wow, there's these challenges in the world, but if we just stop at thinking about it, we haven't completed the cycle. So it needs to call us toward action. What do we do? How do we work for to make a world a better place? Or how do we work toward our next decision we want to make in life, whatever it might be? it's calling us and drawing us into action. And it's a cycle. So once we have acted, we're going to go right back to reflecting on, all right, where are we at now? And how do we reflect on anything critically about this? And how does that guide us to our next action? So really, I'm saying it's characteristics of your Jesuit education, but I think our hope is that if these 4 years have been formative for you, it's something you can carry with you for the rest of your life. I think I personally was deeply formed by my Jesuit education, and it definitely affects the way that I interact with the world and make decisions and view things long after walking the stage at commencement. So it's, impacts all of that.
Do you feel comfortable giving us an example of how you approach decision making and action taking in your own life that is informed by this tradition?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me think of a good example. So before I came back to Canisius to work here in my role as a campus minister, I was working at a job in Chicago, and I was enjoying my work. I was finding it fulfilling. I enjoyed my colleagues. Life was pretty good. And then this job opening came up at Canisius, and I said, "Ooh, campus ministry, Canisius, that sounds interesting to me. It sounds like it might be a good fit." But I was really sort of torn between, again, I liked my job and my life and my work in Chicago and what I was doing. And so I felt that wasn't a bad option. It was good. It was a perfectly fine place to stay and continue. Or did I pursue this opportunity of applying for a job at Canisius and all that would come with that, and a move and a new kind of type of work? And so for me if any of my friends from that time know that I was really kind of stuck and torn about what should I do. And so I think these tools of reflection and discernment, I took some time and stepped back and reflected on myself, my value, like what did I want out of life, especially about life, professional life. What are my values? What was I hoping to accomplish, and how could maybe each of those jobs either get me towards that or away from that? And there wasn't a bad decision. There was not a right decision or a wrong decision. That's why discernment's super helpful, because either job would have been fine. But using some of these tools to reflect and realize what I felt like I was being kind of called to or drawn toward, or what I wanted to engage in the next chapter. And so that ultimately, the action that came from that reflection was deciding to apply to the job at Canisius, and I was ultimately hired, and now here I am almost 4 years later. But this idea of I had to kind of do some of that internal reflection about me and what was important to me and my priorities to then be able to make an informed next action step in my own life.
Thank you for sharing that. I recall that Kaitlyn was in the interviewing class when I applied for the job at Canisius, so there's another full circle that happens here. And I recall that when you were considering the job at Canisius, you reached out to me. At the time I was in Santiago, Chile, so I vividly remember that. And then when you came to the campus interview, I believe we were painting the mural in Old Main 314. So it's funny how these things happen. I wonder, Kaitlyn, moving forward on from this, if you could tell us what UAP stands for and what they are and what they mean and how that is related to what we're doing here at Canisius.
Yeah. So the UAPs are the Universal Apostolic Preferences of the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. And so essentially, in the simplest terms, the UAPs, these apostolic preferences, are the priorities of the Jesuits. So the entire Jesuits in all of their nonprofits and colleges and schools and ministries, all the stuff the Jesuits do, which is really broad and all sorts of works across the globe. The UAPs are their priorities for the next 10 years. So these got announced in 2019. So from 2019 to 2029, the Universal Apostolic Preferences are what they are striving to to really hone their efforts toward these four preferences. Do you want me to go into what those are?
Yes, if you could.
So there are four of them. You'll hear them referred to in different ways, but basically the four of them, the first one is to show the way to God through the spiritual exercises and discernment. That's the decision making I was talking about a moment ago. To walk with the poor, the outcasts of the world, those whose dignity have been violated in a mission of reconciliation and justice. The third one is to accompany young people in the creation of a hope-filled future. And the fourth is to collaborate in the care of our common home. So these are the four themes, the four areas that the Jesuits said we really want to lean into and prioritize for basically this next decade.
So in perhaps more layman terms, right? I'm going to skip over the first one for a second, but the second one is essentially focused on social justice issues, correct?
Yeah.
And the third one, remind me, I'm sorry, the third one?
Accompanying young people.
So focus on the youth. And then the fourth one is about the environment and so forth. Yeah. And I think that many people can appreciate, understand, and support those principles, right? Mm-hmm. How do you explain or help us understand the first principle of bringing us towards God for those who are either not of the Catholic tradition or not of a Christian tradition and or not of any faith tradition? How are these preferences applicable, in particular the first one?
Yeah, no, really good question. So I think something that is great about the UAPs and about the Jesuits in general is that this stuff is designed to be accessible. Whether you're Catholic, not Catholic, Christian, don't have a faith tradition, whatever it is, they're designed, these values and these priorities, I think can be, they're kind of humanistic values. And so I think they're really accessible. And I think that's why a lot of students at Canisius say, wow, Jesuit values like caring for the whole person and magis or striving for more or discernment, like there's a trueness or a richness or a connection, I think, there in a faith-based context or not, that I think is relevant and accessible. And so, yes, for the Jesuits, these priorities and values come from their faith tradition, but I think it really can be accessible for folks that are in any stage of life. And especially, with the first UAP, there's this language and this wording of, to show the way to God. And I know for some folks that can be language that can get caught up on. So what I always say is, substitute whatever word makes sense for you in your tradition. So it could be finding the way toward God, toward Buddha, toward light, toward love, toward goodness, whatever word resonates for you. For me, the word that works for that is God. That's the God of my understanding, but that's not necessarily the word that works for everybody. So the idea of helping people move toward goodness, light, and sound decision making through discernment, that's really what that UAP is focusing on. So I think that can be accessible for folks from all different faith traditions. And then the other ones, walking with those on the margins, working for justice, accompanying young people, whether that's, younger than you all or even college students, how are we intentionally lifting up your voices, your perspectives, your stories, your priorities? What do young people want to see? It's pretty different than many older folks. And, caring for creation, caring for our common home, these are, I think, accessible and relevant really to us as part of the human family. That's still, I think, accessible, whether it's in a faith-based context or beyond.
Thank you for that explanation. Perhaps now would be a good time to talk about who founded the Order of the Jesuits, like who was responsible for this whole Jesuit thing. And so perhaps you could give us a brief little introduction to Saint Ignatius of Loyola and explore or enlighten us a little bit as to the origins of this tradition.
Yes. So the founder of the Jesuits was Saint Ignatius of Loyola. And so I'll give you kind of the short story, the very, very abridged version of his life and kind of why he's relevant and somebody we're still talking about 500 years later. So Saint Ignatius was born in Spain. He was a soldier. From early accounts, in many ways, he was enjoying all of the pleasures of life, and so he liked to drink and be a nice macho soldier, and by all accounts was kind of a ladies' man and enjoyed just really living up life and all of all of that came with it. And so and he's a soldier. He's living life, and then he's in a battle, and in this battle, what ends up happening is his leg is hit with a cannonball. It basically destroys his leg. And so he needs to go on bed rest because 500 years ago, if you break your leg, there's not great healthcare and medical access. So essentially, he's stuck at home in a bed for months and months and months on end as his leg is healing. And there wasn't a lot to do or a lot to keep him entertained. And so at the time, there were two books that he had available, basically a book about the life of Jesus and a book about the life of the saints. And so for him, as he's recovering and recouping, he's reading these two books, and he's kind of realizing, hey, I kind of want to emulate what I'm reading about in these books, and started to imagine his life instead of imagining, going back to his old ways of being a soldier and the ladies and the drinking. He was like, when I imagine myself in the roles of these people, when I imagine myself not just a soldier, but a soldier for God, I'm finding a deeper, more lasting sense of joy. And so for him, that ultimately meant that he, once he recovered, he kind of went on this whole journey and became the Saint Ignatius as we know him today. Now, why am I telling you this story about a guy that got hit by a cannonball and his conversion? And how is that relevant to us, right? I get it. So for him, his path, his conversion moment was to really dedicate himself to his faith and become a saint. But I think all of us, we all have cannonball moments in our lives. We all have things that come out of nowhere and change the trajectory of the rest of our life. It doesn't mean you're going to become a saint, but we have these things that can really change and shift who we are and where we're going. And so for St. Ignatius, he went on the spiritual journey, founded the Jesuits, and now we're at a school today that was founded in that tradition and these same values. And so it's become, it's still relevant in our world today. I'm probably not going to have a legacy that's relevant 500 years from now, but who knows? I could have a Cannonball moment tomorrow that changes all of that. So this idea of moments in life that really change our trajectories, and I think that's a theme that we can all connect to.
I think you're correct. We all have cannonball moments. The question is, do we discern through them and take action in response to them? And that's the challenge, right? And that's what a Jesuit education hopefully helps us to do.
Yeah, a friend of mine said, like cannonballs hurt. We all get hit by cannonballs, right? It's painful, it's messy.
Yeah.
What do we do with it?
Right.
And so we have this example in St. Ignatius of what he did with that moment. And so when we get knocked down or things unexpected happen, how are we discerning our way to what that calls us to be next?
A good lesson for life. I wonder, I think it's important to note too that the Jesuit tradition is global at this point. There are educational centers across the globe. We have relationships as an institution with many of them. Campus ministry does as well. And so forth. And of course, our current Pope Francis is from the
The
Jesuit.
most famous Jesuit at the moment.
Yeah. So if you want more information on many of these things, we will provide the website for this, where there are videos and further examples for your own personal exploration of this. And it's in the chat as well, which we can see here. Jesuits.global/UAP, and you should be able to find it.
Yeah.
Kaitlyn, I wonder as we conclude if you would be comfortable sharing a Cannonball moment that you've experienced with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think for me, my time at my whole 4 years at Canisius, my time at Canisius was one giant Cannonball moment where I wouldn't be the person I am today or have the values or the priorities I have today if it had not been for that education and professors, again, like Dr. Reitzma, that were very much a part of that journey and formation for me. But if I think of one specific, I think, Cannonball moment from my own life, when I was a sophomore at Canisius, I participated in a service immersion experience to El Salvador. And we spent about 10 days learning about the history of El Salvador and doing some service and getting to know folks that were working on the ground. And I remember one of the days we were there, we had lunch with an American who had been volunteering in El Salvador for several years now. And she kind of told us about herself and her experience. And I remembered being like really moved by this conversation. And I kept having this thought of like, I want to be her. And it wasn't literally like I wanted to be her or live her life or have that exact journey. But there was something about this idea of doing a term of service and being abroad and the experiences she was sharing about that just really, I was feeling really drawn to. And so I think the experience, the full experience in El Salvador that week as well, just learning about the history of the Jesuits and the Salvadoran Civil War, and just being really deeply impacted and moved. So I came back to Canisius, lived my life. I was came back the end of sophomore year. Graduation was far on the horizon. And then as I was approaching graduation and thinking about what I wanted to do next, that was the memory that kept surfacing for me. And so ultimately that was what helped me realize that I thought I maybe wanted to do a year of service after graduation, wanted to go to Latin America, and led me to doing a year of service in Ecuador after I graduated college, which was without a doubt the most transformative year of my life. And I think very much the person I am today has been shaped by that time in Ecuador. So yeah, I think that this random conversation with this woman in El Salvador, I don't even remember her name. I have no idea what her name is. I have no way to like thank her. You know, it was a conversation at the time, but that Cannonball really just kind of propelled me toward a lot of what I did next and where I am today. So I think a Cannonball moment was my service immersion experience in El Salvador.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of funny and also sort of appropriate that you can't remember her name.
No, because sometimes like at the time it didn't seem like that significant of a moment. You know, I remember feeling like connected to what she was sharing and enjoying it, but it's only now with a little bit of hindsight where I say, wow, I think a seed was really planted in that conversation that led me to a lot of where I am today. But yeah, I can't even remember her name. So sometimes I think, sometimes a Cannonball when it hits you, and sometimes you sort of realize it with a little bit of clarity a little bit later on.
Right. No, I think that's true. I'm also not sure how to take the fact that you say I'm a Cannonball, but
you can take that however you want.
A little Miley Cyrus Cannonball.
It's not what I said, but okay.
I was teasing. Well, Kaitlyn, thank you for this. If you are interested, students watching this, in campus ministry activities, sure Caitlin would be happy to talk to you more about them, both in terms of on-campus or local retreats, but Caitlin organizes retreats as well as local, national, and international service and service learning type trips. I've been on several of them. I've had the fortune to participate in El Salvador, not with Caitlin, but with other students, as well as twice to the US Mexico border and some other programs. I really encourage you to consider those opportunities. And for those of you approaching graduation or thinking about graduation, Caitlin would also be a good resource for what to do in your quote gap year as you think about your future. Perhaps a year of service, either locally, nationally, or internationally, would be valuable to you as well. And Caitlin, we can put there your email also in the chat. Should people want to reach out to you for more? And I think that's all that I have for our little session here. Thank you, Caitlin, for participating in this, and thank you all to those who are listening to us.